I didn't know my life was about to split in two at the exact moment the countdown hit zero. Fireworks were already echoing outside. Voices from neighboring apartments were cheering, glasses clinking, people kissing, welcoming a brand new year full of hope. I was standing in my own living room, wrapped in a sweater I'd chosen carefully, next to the man I was supposed to marry. My fiancé checked his phone at midnight and smiled. Not a polite smile, not a casual one, a real smile. The kind I hadn't seen directed at me in weeks. Then he said it. My ex still knows how to make a new year feel special. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't ask who texted first or what the message said. I just looked at him and replied, "Enjoy the memories." And I walked outside as the countdown finished. When he came looking for me a few minutes later, confused, annoyed, maybe a little defensive, he found something unlocked that had never been unlocked before. Not the door, the truth. I'm 36 years old, and until that night, I truly believed I had my future figured out. I'd been engaged for 8 months to a man I'd dated for 3 years before that. We'd met in one of those storybook ways people roll their eyes at a friend's wedding, of all places. I caught the bouquet. He caught my eye. It felt corny and perfect and impossible to ignore. He was intelligent, charming, ambitious, the kind of man people trusted easily, the kind of man who made you believe stability and love could coexist without effort. Within 6 months, we moved in together. Within 2 years, he proposed. Everything felt right, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. What I didn't realize then was that the most dangerous betrayals don't always come with secrets hidden behind locked phones or lipstick on collars. Sometimes they come wrapped in nostalgia, in comparisons, in smiles that don't belong to you anymore. That New Year's Eve, standing alone on my porch while fireworks lit up the sky, I finally stopped pretending I didn't see what had been there all along. And once I unlocked it, there was no going back. I was 33 when I met him, and at that stage of my life, I wasn't chasing fantasy anymore. I had a stable career, a close circle of friends, and a clear sense of what I wanted. Partnership, not drama. Marriage built on mutual respect, not chaos disguised as passion. We met at a friend's wedding, the kind people joke about because it sounds scripted. I caught the bouquet, laughed it off, and when I turned around, he was already looking at me. Not in a hungry way, in a curious one. Like he was genuinely interested in who I was, not just what I looked like in a dress. We talked for hours that night, about work, about travel, about how neither of us believed in rushing things, but also didn't believe in wasting time. He was thoughtful, articulate, confident without being loud. When he asked for my number, it didn't feel like a gamble. It felt obvious. Dating him was easy in the beginning, effortless even. He planned dates, remembered things I mentioned in passing, checked in without hovering. He made space for me in his life early, introduced me to his friends, brought me to family gatherings without hesitation. His mother hugged me like she already assumed I was permanent. Within 6 months, we moved in together. Not impulsively, logically. We were already living in each other's spaces most nights, already sharing routines. Groceries, laundry, Sunday mornings. It felt like a natural progression, not a leap. 2 years in, he proposed. Nothing flashy, no crowd, just the two of us on a quiet weekend away. He got down on one knee, nervous in a way that felt sincere, and said he couldn't imagine building a future with anyone else. I said yes without hesitation. Looking back, that's the part that hurts the most. Not that I said yes, but that I meant it completely. The small cracks were there even then, though I didn't recognize them as warnings. He talked about his past more than I expected. Not in a bitter way, in a nostalgic one. Stories about trips he'd taken, traditions he'd had, memories that still made him smile. Sometimes his ex-name would come up casually, how she used to plan surprises, how she remembered tiny details, how she loved holidays. I brushed it off. Everyone has a past. Everyone has memories. I told myself I was being mature by not reacting, by not letting insecurity creep in where it didn't belong. What I didn't understand yet was this. There's a difference between acknowledging your past and living in it. And I was slowly becoming a supporting character in a story he hadn't finished telling. The shift didn't arrive like a storm. It came as a drizzle, light enough to ignore, constant enough to soak through everything eventually. It started with comments that sounded harmless on the surface. Little observations slipped into conversation when we were relaxed, when defenses were down. My ex used to surprise me with weekend trips, he said once, scrolling through photos on his phone. Nothing big, just spontaneous. Another time, after I'd planned a date night, restaurant, movie, dessert at home, he smiled and added, "This is nice." She used to do something similar, but she always found these little hidden places. I laughed them off. I told myself he was just reminiscing, that I was reading too much into it. I didn't want to be the woman who turned every mention of an ex into a confrontation, but the comments kept coming. When I bought him a gift, he said it was thoughtful, then added, "She really understood my taste, though. She always picked exactly what I wanted." When I tried to surprise him at work with lunch, he thanked me and casually mentioned how his ex used to send flowers just because. Each comparison landed softly, but together they formed a pattern. A quiet, persistent message I couldn't ignore anymore. "You're good, but she was better." I started noticing how often his phone was in his hand, how his expression changed when a certain name appeared on the screen, how he smiled at messages that had nothing to do with me. I asked once gently, "Do you still talk to her often?" He shrugged, "Here and there. We're on good terms. It's nothing." Nothing became more frequent. He mentioned texts on holidays, inside jokes I wasn't part of, long messages he described as catching up. When I asked how she was doing, he'd launch into detailed stories about her life. Work stress, family drama, plans for the future. He knew more about her current life than I was comfortable with. Still, I stayed quiet. Part of me didn't want to acknowledge the discomfort because naming it would make it real. Another part of me feared that speaking up would label me as insecure, controlling, or jealous, the very things I'd worked so hard not to be. Friends noticed before I admitted it to myself. One night, after dinner, a close friend asked, "Why does it feel like you're competing with someone who isn't even in the room?" I laughed, but my chest tightened. Because she was right. The atmosphere between us grew heavier. Conversations felt measured. I found myself choosing words carefully, avoiding topics that might circle back to his past. I stopped planning surprises, afraid they'd be compared unfavorably. I was still his fiancée, still wearing the ring, still planning a wedding. But slowly, quietly, I was becoming someone who doubted her place in her own relationship. And deep down, I knew this wasn't about jealousy. It was about being present with someone who wasn't fully here with me. New Year's Eve was supposed to be simple. That was the plan we both agreed on. No crowds, no overpriced parties, no forced cheer. Just the two of us at home, takeout on the table, candles lit, champagne chilling in the fridge. A quiet beginning to what I believe would be the first of many years we'd start together as an engaged couple. I wanted it to feel intentional. I cleaned the apartment earlier that day, not because it needed it, but because I wanted the night to feel fresh. I picked his favorite takeout without asking. I set up candles on the coffee table and folded the blanket just the way he liked. I bought champagne I couldn't really justify the price of and told myself it was worth it. We were on the couch around 11:30, the television glowing with pre-countdown coverage, hosts laughing too loudly, reminding everyone how much promise a new year held. His phone buzzed. He picked it up instantly. I noticed the smile before I noticed anything else. Not a polite smile, not a reflex, a genuine one. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Nothing," he said, "just a text." He didn't look at me. His thumbs moved quickly across the screen. Another buzz, then another. He was fully absorbed now, shoulders slightly turned away, attention somewhere else entirely. I tried to focus on the television, but the distance between us felt physical, like an empty space growing wider with every second. "Must be a good one," I said. He nodded absent-mindedly. At 11:45, he was still typing. At 11:50, still smiling at his phone. At 11:55, I felt something cold settle in my chest. Finally, at 11:58, he glanced up. "Sorry, I got distracted." "I can see that," I said carefully. He glanced back at his phone. My ex texted me wishing me a happy new year. I felt my stomach drop. "Your ex?" I repeated. "Yeah," he said casually. "He always texts me on holidays. It's sweet." Sweet. The word echoed louder than the fireworks starting outside. The countdown began on the television. 10. He looked back down at his phone. 9. Typing. 8. Smiling. 7. I watched him, waiting, for him to look up, to notice me, to remember I was sitting right next to him. 6. 5. 4. My heart was pounding now, but I stayed still. 3. 2. He hit send. 1. Cheers erupted from the TV. Confetti fell in Times Square. Fireworks exploded outside our windows. He finally looked at me. "My ex still knows how to make a new year feel special," he said, almost wistful. I stared at him, the words taking a second longer than they should have to register. "What?" I asked quietly. He sent this whole message, he continued, unaware or unwilling to notice what was happening inside me. About our memories, about how he hopes I'm happy. It was really touching. I didn't respond right away. I stood up. Enjoy the memories, I said. He looked confused. What? Where are you going? I grabbed my jacket. Outside. It's midnight, he said. We're supposed to... You already celebrated, I replied, just not with me. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. The cold air hit my face sharply, biting, grounding. Fireworks lit up the sky in the distance. I could hear neighbors laughing, hugging, welcoming a future that felt suddenly very far away from mine. Standing there alone, something inside me finally snapped into place. I pulled out my phone and did something I'd been avoiding for weeks. I unlocked a folder I'd created but never opened fully. Screenshots. Messages I'd seen over his shoulder. Notifications that disappeared too quickly. Comments that felt wrong but were always explained away. I scrolled through them as fireworks burst overhead. Messages about missing each other, wondering if they'd made a mistake breaking up, admitting he sometimes thought about her while he was with me. The most recent one was from 3 weeks ago. The door opened behind me. "What are you doing out here?" he asked. "It's freezing." I didn't turn around. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "about whether I'm engaged to someone who actually wants to marry me." Silence followed. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. I turned to face him, screenshots still glowing in my hand. "It means I'm done pretending I don't see what's right in front of me." And for the first time all night, he looked nervous. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, already defensive. That posture, the one that said he was preparing to argue, not to listen, made something inside me ache. Not because I wanted his comfort, but because I realized how often I'd seen that look whenever I tried to talk about things that mattered. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked again. I took a slow breath. My hands were steady in a way that surprised me. "It means I'm exhausted," I said. "I'm tired of hearing about your ex. I'm tired of being compared to him, and I'm tired of feeling like I'm competing with someone who isn't even here." "I never said you weren't good enough," he shot back. "You don't have to," I replied quietly. "You say it every time you smile at your phone because he texts you. Every time you tell me how he used to do things better. Every time you make me feel like I'm the consolation prize." "That's not fair," he said. "I'm just being honest about my past." "No," I said. "You're living in it. There's a difference." He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The cold wrapped around us both. "You're overreacting," he said. "Am I?" I asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're still in love with him." "I'm not in love with him," he said immediately. "I'm engaged to you." "Then why do you keep talking to him?" I asked. "Why do you keep letting him take up space in our relationship?" "Because we're friends," he said. "Adults can be friends with their exes. Friends don't send each other messages about how special they are at midnight on New Year's Eve," I said. "Not when their fiancée is sitting right next to them." For the first time, he didn't have an answer. I pulled out my phone and unlocked the screen. "Do you want to know what I've been doing for the last 10 minutes?" I asked. He frowned. "What?" "Reading through the messages you thought I didn't see." His face went pale. "You went through my phone?" he said sharply. "I didn't have to," I replied. "You're not as discreet as you think. You leave messages open. You smile at your screen while I'm talking to you. I've seen enough." "That's a violation of privacy," he snapped. "And emotionally cheating on me isn't?" I shot back. "I'm not cheating," he said. "Nothing physical happened." "But you wanted it to," I said. "That's what these messages say, that you miss him, that you think about him, that you wonder what would have happened if you stayed together." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "It's complicated," he finally said. "No," I said. "It's simple. Either you want to be with me, or you don't." "I do want to be with you." "Then prove it," I said. "Lock him, right now." He hesitated. That hesitation said everything. "It's not that simple," he muttered. "We have mutual friends. We're going to run into each other." "Then be civil when you do," I said. "But you don't need to be texting him at midnight. You don't need to be telling him how special he is. You don't need to keep him in your life like some kind of backup plan." "He's not a backup plan," he said defensively. "Then what is he?" I asked. He didn't answer. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. "I'm going to stay at a friend's place tonight," I said. "You can stay here, but I need you to think about what you actually want, because I'm done pretending this doesn't hurt." I walked past him, grabbed my keys and a bag, and headed for the door. "You're really leaving?" he asked. "On New Year's?" "You already spent New Year's with him," I said. "I'm just making it official." I didn't look back when I walked out. That night I didn't cry. I felt something quieter. Resolve. I stayed at a friend's place for 3 days. She didn't ask many questions. She didn't push me to talk before I was ready. She handed me a spare blanket, made coffee in the mornings, and let silence do what words couldn't. The first day, I turned my phone off completely. I needed the quiet. Not to punish him, just to hear myself think again. When I finally turned my phone back on, it vibrated nonstop. 47 missed calls, over 100 texts. Most were apologies. Long, rambling explanations about how he didn't mean it, how I was misinterpreting things, how it wasn't what it looked like. Some were angry, telling me I was being dramatic, unreasonable, cruel for leaving without talking it through. A few were desperate, begging me to come home so we could fix it. Then there were messages from other people. His friends, his sister, even his mother. They all said the same thing in different words. He made a mistake. He loves you. Don't throw this away. I didn't respond to any of them. On the fourth day, I went back to the apartment while he was at work. I needed clothes, documents, things that belonged to me. I also needed to see the space with clear eyes, without his presence softening the truth. The apartment felt colder than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. There were 2 wine glasses in the sink, a blanket draped over the couch that hadn't been there before. Nothing definitive, but enough to make my chest tighten. I went into the bedroom and started packing. That's when I saw his laptop open on the bed. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew that once I did, there would be no pretending anymore. But something in me was done protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. The screen was still open to his messages, not just with his ex, with his friends. Group chats where my name came up again and again. I don't know if I can go through with the wedding. I keep thinking about what could have been. She's safe, she's stable, but is that enough? My ex texted me last night and I felt more excited than I have in months. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking as I scrolled. These messages weren't from a moment of confusion. They were months old, months of doubt, months of comparison, months of planning a wedding while privately questioning whether I was the woman he actually wanted. I took photos of everything. Then I closed the laptop, finished packing, and headed for the door. He came home early. We stood in the living room, 10 feet apart, like strangers negotiating a truce. "You came back," he said, "to get my things. Are we going to talk about this?" he asked. "What's there to talk about?" I replied. "You don't want to marry me. You've been clear about that with everyone except me." "That's not true," he said quickly. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos. His face drained of color. "You went through my laptop." "You left it open," I said. "And I'm glad you did. At least now I know the truth." "That was just venting," he said weakly. "Everyone vents." "Venting is complaining about dishes in the sink," I said. "This is you questioning our entire relationship while asking me to plan a future with you." He sat down, head in his hands. "I don't know what I want." I nodded. "I do." I picked up my bags. "I want someone who's sure about me. Someone who doesn't keep me around as a backup while fantasizing about someone else." "Please," he said quietly. "Just give me time." "I already did," I replied. "You just didn't tell me you were using it to decide if I was enough." As I walked out, he said one last thing. "What about the ring?" I turned. He was holding his hand out, the engagement ring still on his finger. "Keep it," I said. "Sell it. Throw it away. It was meant for someone who actually wanted to marry me." And I left. That was the moment everything escalated from heartbreak to clarity. Because once you see the truth written in someone else's words, you can't unsee it. The studio apartment I moved into was small. 1 room, 1 window, a bed that barely fit against the wall. It should have felt temporary. Instead, it felt like a quiet reckoning. The first night there, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, lights off, listening to the hum of traffic outside. No champagne, no countdown, no noise. Just the echo of everything I'd been holding in for months finally settling. This was the lowest point, not because I missed him, but because I realized how long I'd been alone with him. A week passed, then another. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, like I was reintroducing myself to my own life. Workdays filled the hours. Evenings stretched long. Sometimes I felt relief. Other times, a hollow ache pressed in, especially at night, when routines used to include someone else's presence. Then the call came. It was his ex. I didn't recognize the number at first. I almost didn't answer. "Hi," he said, awkward, hesitant. "I know this is strange, but I think we should talk." I laughed quietly, more out of disbelief than humor. "I don't think we should." "I'm not calling to hurt you," he said quickly. I need to clear something up." Against my better judgment, I listened. "I'm not trying to get back together with him," he said. "I have a boyfriend. I've been with him for over a year." The room felt suddenly too small. "What?" I said. "I text on holidays because we ended things amicably," he continued. I'm just being friendly. I'm not interested in him romantically. I haven't been for a long time. My throat tightened. Does he know you have a boyfriend? Yes, he said. I've mentioned him multiple times. I closed my eyes. Then why? I asked slowly. Does he talk about you like you're the one who got away? He hesitated. Because it's easier to romanticize something that's over than deal with what's real. Then he said something that cracked everything open. He always needed validation, he admitted. Constant reassurance, comparing me to people from my past. I tried, but it was never enough. Eventually, I realized I couldn't make him happy. I sat in silence after the call ended. So it wasn't just me. This wasn't a momentary lapse, it was a pattern. He hadn't just been emotionally cheating. He'd been using his ex as a mirror, reflecting back a version of himself he preferred, while tearing down the reality he was building with me. That night, I cried for the first time. Not because I wanted him back. Because I finally accepted that the relationship I thought I was losing had never really existed the way I believed it did. And that realization, that I had been loving someone who wasn't fully present, was the darkest truth of all. But it was also the beginning of the end. The turning point didn't arrive with a grand speech or a dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, the morning after that phone call, when I woke up and realized something fundamental had changed. For the first time since the engagement, I wasn't confused. I made coffee in my small kitchen, standing barefoot on cold tile, replaying the ex's words in my mind. Constant validation, comparing people, never satisfied. They weren't accusations, they were observations. And suddenly, everything made sense. The comparisons, the nostalgia, the way I always felt like I was auditioning for a role I already had. I wasn't failing him. He was chasing a feeling that didn't exist. That clarity gave me back something I hadn't realized I'd lost. My authority over my own story. A few days later, his sister called me. We'd always been close, and her voice sounded tired. I don't think he's being honest with himself, she said carefully. He keeps saying you walked away too fast. I didn't feel defensive. I didn't feel the need to justify myself. I walked away late, I replied. I just stopped pretending. She was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed. I think you're right. That was the first time. Someone from his side acknowledged the truth without trying to soften it. I started doing things deliberately. Not out of anger, but out of intention. I changed my mailing address, opened a new bank account, updated documents. Each small step felt grounding, like placing bricks under my feet. Then, 2 weeks after I left, he showed up at my door. It was a Thursday night around 10. I hadn't told him where I lived. I still don't know how he found out. When I opened the door, he looked smaller somehow, tired, his confidence gone. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside and let him in. Not because I wanted him back, but because I wanted the conversation to end on truth, not unanswered questions. He sat on the couch, head in his hands. I've been thinking about everything you said, and you were right. I was emotionally cheating. I was comparing you to him. I wasn't being fair. I nodded. I know. I started seeing a therapist, he continued quickly. She says I have attachment issues, that I sabotage relationships when they get too real. I'm glad you're getting help, I said honestly. I want to fix this, he said, eyes pleading. I want us to try again. I sat across from him, calm in a way that surprised even me. I don't, I said. He looked stunned. Why not, if I'm working on myself? Because I don't trust you anymore, I said gently. And I don't want to spend the next 5 years wondering if I'm being compared to someone who doesn't even want you. Trust can be rebuilt. Maybe, I said, but I don't want to rebuild it with you. He stared at me, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. When you picture our future, I asked, what do you see? He opened his mouth, then closed it. That's why, I said softly, I don't want to be someone's question mark. He started crying. I didn't move to comfort him, not because I was cold, but because this time I was done carrying his emotions for him. When he left, slamming the door behind him, I didn't feel shaken. I felt settled. The power had shifted, not because I'd taken it from him, but because I'd finally taken it back. The fallout didn't explode all at once. It unfolded slowly, quietly, in ways that felt almost anticlimactic after everything I'd endured. About a month after I moved out, I started hearing things through mutual friends. Not gossip, patterns. He'd reached out to his ex again after we ended things, told her we'd broken up, asked if she wanted to get coffee. She declined. Apparently she'd reminded him, again, that she was still in a relationship and had no interest in revisiting the past. That rejection hit him harder than he expected. According to his sister, he spiraled after that, not in a dramatic way, but in a confused one, angry one day, self-pitying the next, telling different versions of the story depending on who was listening. To some people, I was too sensitive. To others, I gave up too fast. To a few, he admitted he didn't know what he wanted and lost me because of it. What stayed consistent was this: no one was rushing to defend him anymore. People who knew us well started connecting dots they'd ignored before. The constant comparisons. The way he talked about his past like it was unfinished business. The way I'd always been the one adjusting, explaining, softening. His mother stopped calling me to work things out. His friends stopped asking when we'd reconcile. The narrative lost momentum once it ran into facts. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt detached. I stayed focused on logistics, finalizing the lease, closing shared accounts, dividing things cleanly. When we had to communicate, it was brief and factual. No emotion, no rehashing. One afternoon, his sister called again. "She's blaming you for everything now," she said quietly. "Saying you betrayed her trust. Saying you were the reason she can't move on." "That's not my problem," I replied. And for the first time, I meant it without bitterness. "She's also been posting things online," she added. "Vague stuff about being hurt, being abandoned." "Let her," I said. "Anyone who knows the truth already does." There was a pause on the line. "You're handling this better than I expected," she said. "I'm tired," I admitted. "I don't have energy to be angry anymore." 2 months after the breakup, I ran into him at a mutual friend's gathering. I almost didn't go, but I refused to let him dictate where I felt comfortable. He was there with someone new, a woman I didn't recognize. He introduced her as his girlfriend. They'd started dating a few weeks after we ended things. I didn't feel jealous. I felt confirmation. This wasn't about me. It never had been. It was about his inability to sit with discomfort, to be alone long enough to understand himself. He tried to talk to me later, cornered me near the kitchen. "You look good," he said awkwardly. "Thanks," I replied. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry for how things ended." "It's fine," I said honestly. "Is it?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "It really is." He looked unsettled by that. "So we're okay?" he asked. "We're not anything," I said calmly. "We're just two people who used to be together and now aren't." "That's cold," he muttered. "No," I said, "it's honest." He didn't have a response. I left the party an hour later, drove home, and realized something important. I wasn't carrying his story anymore. The fallout landed where it needed to, not as punishment, not as revenge, but as consequence. And I was finally free to step out of the debris. 6 months have passed since that New Year's Eve. Life didn't magically become perfect. There was no cinematic moment where everything clicked into place. What happened instead was quieter and far more real. I stopped waking up with that familiar knot in my chest, the one that came from wondering whether I was enough, whether I was being compared, whether the person next to me was secretly somewhere else in their mind. I heard through his sister that he broke up with the woman he'd been seeing. Apparently she wasn't the one either. That didn't surprise me. When someone is constantly chasing a feeling, no person ever gets to be enough. I didn't feel smug about it. I didn't feel validated. I felt grateful. Grateful that I didn't marry someone who would have spent our entire marriage measuring me against ghosts. Grateful that I didn't tie my future to a man who confused nostalgia with love and comparison with honesty. A few months after everything ended, I met someone new. Nothing dramatic, no fireworks. We met at a coffee shop of all places, started talking about something insignificant, and kept talking because it felt easy. He's grounded, present, comfortable with silence. When I told him about my past, he listened, then shrugged and said, "Sounds like she didn't know what she had." That was it. No jealousy, no interrogation, no insecurity disguised as curiosity. We're taking things slowly, and for the first time in a long time, slow feels safe. I still think about my ex sometimes, not with longing, not with anger, but with clarity. Because that night, when he checked his phone at midnight and told me his ex made him feel special, he gave me something invaluable. The truth. He showed me exactly who he was before I married him, before I spent years trying to be enough for someone who was always looking backward. The hardest lesson I learned is this. If someone makes you feel like you're constantly being compared, you're already being replaced, emotionally, if not physically. And when you're someone's second choice, you will always wonder when they're looking for an upgrade. Life is too short for that kind of uncertainty. Walking outside that night, unlocking those screenshots, finally allowing myself to see what I'd been avoiding. It wasn't weakness. It was self-respect. And choosing yourself doesn't always look brave in the moment. Sometimes it just looks like walking away quietly, knowing you deserve more. That was the best decision I ever made.